Okay guys, it's finally time. We've finally gotten it ready to go. So today's video is about how to sew your own cloth menstrual pad using a sewing machine. Don't be afraid of your sewing machine. The first thing I ever made with a sewing machine was a cloth menstrual pad. So before we get into this, a couple of things. Number one, don't be hard on yourself. The first time most people make a menstrual pad, because they're a little more complex than some other things that you sew. Don't expect them to look perfect the first time, and go easy on yourself. You know, it doesn't mean that you are not any good at this, or that you're we get so many people on the sewing Facebook group who come in and go, oh, it's a complete fail. And it's not a fail if it works, and it's really hard to mess one of these up badly enough that it won't work. So keep that in mind. Practice makes perfect. And I'm not going to get too heavily into the different materials that you can use down here, but I will show you what I'm using and suggest maybe an alternative if you don't have what it is that I'm using, so that you can gather materials from around your house and sew along with me, which is really what I hope you'll do. I hope that you'll give this a try, especially if, you know, cost is a factor for you. You can find stuff around your house to do this. So if you have a sewing machine and some thread, you can do this. So follow me downstairs and we'll get started. Okay, I wanted to take a minute before I get into the video, because once I finished recording the process, I realized that there are questions about what do I use that I didn't really address. If you're doing this for the very first time, if you have some flannel and some terry cloth, or even just some flannel, you can do everything in this video. And if that's your goal, I'm just going to give you an idea of what you do. You would use flannel for the top and the back, and you would use terry cloth or a terry cloth and a mixture of flannel for the inside layers. And if that's something that you want to do, it is a perfectly viable option. It is all of the pads that I made in the very beginning. My first set of pads were nothing but toweling on the inside and flannel on the outside. So if you can do that, or if you need to do that, have at it. You just follow my process using those materials instead of what I have in the video. Okay, so you need to assemble the things you need. You're going to need your pins and some scissors, and I have a couple of markers here, and I'll show you why I have two different ones. You'll need your pattern for your topper and your backer, and you'll need the pattern for your absorbent core materials. Now I was going to use the pattern that we made in my previous video, and I have managed to lose it, so I'm a big idiot. The topper here is just a 100% quilter's cotton piece of fabric. It's just regular cotton fabric. And then for the backing, I'm going to use this brown piece of anti-pill fleece because it coordinates with the brown stripe in the topper, and it's nice and soft. There's lots of fluff all over it because it's been in a pile on my ironing board. So I'm just getting those things ready, and now what we're going to do is trace the pattern onto the material. And for this darker brown fleece, I have this silver Sharpie marker here that I was trying to show on camera and did not succeed. I had it off frame the whole time, I'm sorry. But the reason I use this is because it is more visible than a regular pen on fabrics like this. So basically you just trace around the whole shape as closely as possible. Yeah, I looked for several days for the pattern that I made in that video. I don't know what on earth I did with it, but this pattern I'm using in this video I made it the same way that I made the pattern that I showed you guys in my how to make a symmetrical pattern video. Okay, so now you're going to do the same thing on the cotton fabric, and you want to take time with your topper and make sure that you're putting the pad in a place where we call it placement, where the finished item that you have is going to be including all the parts of the print that you like. So I moved mine over a little because I wanted that thicker pink stripe to be part of it. And then you just trace around the entire shape just like you did before. And then you're just going to, when you finish this, you're just going to take your pair of scissors and you're going to cut on the line that you've drawn on the fabric. You're just going to cut it out. Now, for the absorbent pieces, let's talk about what I'm using in this pad. This white fabric you see me holding there, and I'm going to use it with the absorbent core pattern. That is Zorb 1, and you can order that from wazoodle.com. I think they have it through third-party sellers on Amazon, but I just ordered directly from Wazoodle. And then I'm also going to supplement with 2 pieces of regular cotton flannel. This is just regular flannel like you would have in pajamas or a shirt or something. Now, if you don't have Zorb, you are free to use something else. You can use terry cloth, you can use, an old towel, you can cut that up, or you can use an old shirt or old pajamas, whatever you'd like. But I'm using Zorb in this particular pad. I find that it works really well. Okay, now once you've got your shapes cut out, the first thing I want you to do is sew your absorbent core material layers together. So the flannel and the Zorb are going to go together in the middle of the pad for absorption, and I'm going to take a minute here to sew these together. And I highly recommend that the first thing you do is line them up as carefully as possible and then pin, so that when you're sewing these, they don't go all over the place. Now, I'm assuming, if you're watching this video, that you're a beginner sewer. And one of the reasons that pinning is so important for us beginners is because before you get a good feel for it, the pins just help keep everything in place, because otherwise you tend to have fabrics slide around on one another and not work as well. Okay, so by this point, I had started to lose a little daylight. You'll notice the difference in the lighting here. But what I'm going to do is just show you how to sew these things together. You want to start with your needle in the down position. If you have a walking foot, use it. But since many of you don't have a walking foot to begin with, I'm just going to demonstrate this pad's construction with a regular sewing foot that came on my machine. Now, you're going to notice here that when you get to a curvy area, it's hard to, you don't want to jerk your fabric around. Lift the foot, as I just did with the needle in the down position, and then slowly go around that curve, keeping it lined up. Now, on this one, I'm using a solid 1/2 inch seam allowance because this is just to keep the pad together. I don't want this stitch line next to the edge. Now, what you see me doing there with my fingers is I'm lifting the foot, smoothing the fabric out, and then slowly continuing on. I'm not going to speed this video up because I want you to see that you can do this very slowly, and that that's preferable in the beginning too. The most important thing is to keep your fabric lined up on the indicator on your foot. I'm just using the edge of my foot there to keep the very edge of my foot lined up on the very edge of my fabric, just to keep the seam consistent. And remove the pins. Don't sew over your pins. That's a good way to break a needle, and it can also be dangerous, so don't do that. Take them out when you get near them with your sewing. Okay, so now I'm reaching another curve. You lift the foot, rotate the material, and then put the foot back down and continue to sew. Now, on sharp curves, you can find yourself every 3rd stitch lifting the foot, readjusting the fabric. That's okay. That's okay. When you're going around these contoured shapes like this through multiple layers of fabric, it is difficult to keep the fabric together. And you will learn through practice, practice, practice. I always tell people who are getting discouraged, because I used to get discouraged when my fabric wouldn't line up and I couldn't make it work right, and I'm a little bit of a perfectionist. I would take the stuff and throw it across the room because I'd get so frustrated. Don't get frustrated with yourself. Practice is the key to everything. It really, truly is. And I think I probably sewed 30 pads before they started to look really, really nice. But that's okay, because even the first very wonky, ugly pad that I made, it worked, and it got me off of disposables, and it was so comfortable, and it felt so nice. And even as unattractive as I thought the sewing was in that first pad, it was functional, and it was a whole lot prettier than a disposable because it had flowers on it. Okay, now here you go. I'm going around a curve again. You have to lift the foot with the needle in the down position and then rotate your fabric. So when you get to that curve, you put the needle down. You see me, I'm showing you here that when you get to the end, you'll notice that sometimes those top layers will stretch out over the top of the bottom layer, or vice versa. And that's okay, don't freak out. This is just your absorbent core, it's gonna be okay. Just keep going. Again, needle down position, you lift that foot, readjust your fabric, put it back down. And I did this in real time so that you could see me going around the entire thing at the tempo I actually sewed this item with, because this is not something that you just boom, run through it as fast as possible. You know, it's not a turbocharged crank that sewing machine up and go really fast all the way around. If you do that, you're going to have really ugly stitches. Go slowly. Okay, now when you get to the end here and your stitches have started to overlap, make sure that your stitch line is, you're sewing over the stitches that you did at the beginning. Reverse stitch 2 or 3 stitches. I just backed up my stitching, and then you go forward another 3. This will lock the stitches so they don't come out. And then you're done. So then you lift your needle, lift your foot, trim your strings, and you have your core materials all sewn together, and it's going to be so much easier to get these on the topper now that they're one piece together. Okay, so now you want to lay out your topper piece that you've cut, and I have it right side up here. You're going to flip it over so that the wrong side is facing you, because that's the side we're going to sew the core to. Now I'm putting the Zorb side down because the Zorb tends to absorb a little more quickly than flannel does. So I put the Zorb on, it will be on top when the pad is finished. So facing the topper, your most quick absorbing layer, and then the slower absorbing layers on the bottom. That's just how I do it. Okay, so now we're going to pin this. Now the way I pin my toppers down is I just anchor them by placing pins in the center, because we're going to sew around the edge, and so I put my pins in a place where I don't have to remove them until near the end. However, when I was first beginning, I found it most useful, until I got a feel for my machine, to just put many pins all the way around. So I'm going to pick up a pin here in a second, kind of demonstrate that you can take one and pin them in this fashion all the way around every 3 inches or so when you first begin, if you find that more helpful. Because the key is you want to keep the pad topper and the absorbent core in the same areas while you're sewing. Now, for sewing the pad topper to the core, you have several options for stitches. I use a decorative stitch, and I'm going to show you what that looks like while I'm doing that here. But a regular straight stitch will work as well. Pick a stitch that you're comfortable with. And you want this one to be closer to the edge than it was when we were attaching the core pieces together. I would say 1/4 of an inch away from the edge, or to use a zigzag or some kind of a decorative stitch like the one I'm going to use that goes almost out to the very edge itself. Put your needle in the down position before you start, and then you're going to want to back stitch if you're using a straight stitch. My decorative stitch does not back stitch, so I'll show you what I do for that to lock it when I get to the end. Now this one I did speed up because it's essentially the same process, except that you have the topper on the bottom this time. And we're going to just stitch around. Anytime you get to a curved section where you need to reorient your needle, you stop with your needle in the down position, lift the foot, adjust the direction, and then continue sewing in that fashion all the way around the piece. Don't be afraid to stop and readjust your fabric as you go, and use those pins to make sure that your fabric doesn't move very much. This looks very pretty with a regular straight stitch as well, but I've had lots of questions about how I sew the zigzaggy looking decorative stitch there. Well, it's a programmed stitch in my machine, and I figured showing you that I don't really do anything special. It works exactly the same way as any other stitch. When you come around to the edge, again, you're going to want to get as close to your start point as possible. And when you get to the point where your stitches are overlapping, you're going to back stitch. In my case, I have this where it just puts the needle up and down several times and it knots the thread inside so that it won't come unraveled. And now your core is attached to your topper. Okay. The next step is to get ready to put the backer on. And you're going to set your topper down because the way we're going to do the backer, you're going to have to forgive this weird camera thing I was doing. I was trying to figure out how to show you something, and then I lifted the camera back up on top of the pile of books that I have sitting there, which gives it enough height for you to see. So anyway, I'm sorry for if I made you dizzy. The backer is what we're going to attach now because we're going to put the back on it. I will do another sewing video to show you about how to attach PUL, but I'm not dealing with that in this video. This is just a basic how to make it. All right, so you set the side of your fleece. Fleece tends to be the same, at least for me, on both sides, but what you want here is the right sides facing. So the pretty side of your topper should face the side of the fleece that you want to be on the outside of the pad when you're done. So right sides together. And then basically I'm showing here is that you want to leave your place for turning on the straightest part of your pattern. So on mine, it would be on the side of the wing or on one of those straighter edges there going up toward the end. I use the side of the wing for my turning place, and I always mark where I'm going to start sewing with that first pin. And then I'm just showing here, you're going to go all the way around the edge and you're going to pin a lot so that your backer and your topper stay aligned the way you want them to. Don't get hyper perfectionist about this, but do be careful with it and make sure that, you know, all of your corners and your curves are lined up with the backer and the topper. And make sure that you leave yourself about 2 inches worth of space for turning when you're done. And that's marked right there. Okay, so now it's ready to sew. Okay guys, here we go. Now you're going to want to carefully position your foot about where you put your pin, because that's where you're going to start. You want to straight stitch this about 1/4 inch away from the edge of the fabric. So again, what I've done here is I've just lined up that far side of my presser foot with the edge of my fabric, and I'm using that as my guide all the way around. And basically, this is very simple. You start off with your needle in the down position, back stitch 2 or 3 stitches, and then commence to sewing. And we're just going to go around the entire piece. This is marginally more difficult than it was to add the core to the topper, simply because you've got 2 levels of fabric there to deal with. And so go slow, take your time. Don't be afraid to put the edge of your foot up on top of the core if you need to while you're sewing, so that you can keep your stitch even. This part of sewing the pad is where having a walking foot comes in extremely handy, because a walking foot feeds the fabric. It has feed dogs on the bottom and the top to feed the fabric better. And here in a little while, when we get to this top stitching section, I'm going to show you how to deal with things that get difficult if you don't have a walking foot. At least they do on my machine, in case you happen to have that problem. Basically, you're just going to do this the same way we did everything else. When you get to a turn, when you get to a corner, when you get to a curve, stop with your needle in the down position, lift the presser foot, position your fabric so that everything's where it's supposed to be, and then keep going. It is so much easier to go slow and get it right the first time than it is to stop and rip out stitches. And I have ripped out stitches many, many times. You don't want to do it, trust me. Okay, so now when you get to the end, you've gone all the way around, you're going to want to take at least 4 stitches on this side of your wing to leave your space, you know, but you need to have that corner defined. So come around the corner, then back stitch, and then you're finished with this part, and it's going to be time to clip. In order to make sure that when we turn, everything is nice and neat, we clip our corners and our curves, and I'm going to show you how to do that. All right. I actually turned this pad before I was in the middle of turning it when I remembered that I needed to do it, so I had to turn it right side out again. So that's why it looks all frayed, is it's been rather abused. What we're going to do is clip all the corners and all of the curves. The thing is, and I tried to get this in frame, I clip right up to the stitch line. Do not clip over your stitches, because if you clip your stitches, it'll make a hole in your pad and you'll have to go back and sew that area again. So clip up close to the stitch line, but not into the stitches. This curve, I actually was sewing so close to the edge here that clipping doesn't look like it's worth much, but most of the time when I sew, this is a new pattern that I just drew, so it's the first time I've done this, but this one I actually ended up getting very close to the edge of the fabric. But most of the patterns that I've done, you're not that close to the edge, so you have this excess seam going around the corner and the curves. The corners you're going to clip, as I'm showing you this way, right up into that corner stitch line, but don't clip the stitches. This is just going to make the corners and the curves easier and cleaner looking when you turn the pad, so that there's not excess fabric there, keeping your pad from having the nice shape when you turn it. Curves, you clip out little sections here so that there's not all that bulk. And when you have a full 1/4 inch on the other side of your seam, it's definitely helpful to clip, as I'm demonstrating here. So you just make little notches in every place that's curvy. And then everywhere that you have a corner like this, and on this pad there are 4 places like that, you clip out a little section in the corner, and it makes a huge difference when you turn the pad right side out in how well those corners define themselves and on how smoothly the curves form. So don't skip this step. Now it's time to turn. Now you're going to have, I use a chopstick. I also have a wooden knitting needle, but I just picked something that I thought pretty much everybody would have laying around. You can use a pencil, you can use pretty much anything that will fit inside. Now my strategy when I turn a pad is I reach over and I grab the opposite wing and I start pulling the wing through my turn space. This can be kind of a pain to turn, but you'll get better and better at it with practice. And I'm sorry that my big fist is in your way and you can't really see what I'm doing, but I did try my best to get some of it on the camera. And essentially all you're doing is turning this inside out. I start by pulling out the opposite wing, and then basically you're just making the pad give birth to itself through the hole there. And then I push one end through, and once you get the wing and one of the ends through, everything just eases up and gets much, much easier. And then you can just start pushing the rest through that hole. I'm going to go ahead and speed up the video for you if I can here, because I think that will be helpful. Go, go, go. Okay, it's starting to emerge. We are going to be victorious. There you go. Okay, so once you get to that point, the hard work is done. And now what you got to do is shake it out, get your tool, and start poking out your seams. Just run that chopstick or pencil or whatever you're using all the way around the edges. And I swear I could not have framed this any worse, I don't think, so I apologize. Make sure you get into those corners and poke them out really, really well, because the corners, in order to be sharp, you need to make sure that those seams are poked out really well. That's all there is to it. You're just running the tool along the seams, feeling with your fingers to roll it all out. Now don't get, in a rush on this part either, because it makes all the difference again in the final shape of your pad if you have done a really good job of poking out the corners and rounding out your curves. If you've really pulled all those seams out, feel them with your fingers, make sure everything is good. And we are almost done. Now we need to top stitch. Now before you start sewing, you're going to want to pin up this turn hole that you've done. So the first thing you do is you poke that corner back in and then fold your fabric, and you'll see when it's on a straight, it wants to go in line. So once you get it started, it should fold under very, very easily like this. And you're going to get it to lay down nice and flat and then pin it. See how easy that is? And it's easy like that almost every time if you've done it on a straight section of your pattern. If you've tried to make your turn space on a curve, it's not going to work out nearly that easily. Curves are very difficult as turning spaces, so under no circumstances, unless you simply do not have a straight edge anywhere on your pad, should you use a curve. Always use a straight edge. All right, take it to the machine. Now on this one, I'm going to do a 1/4 inch all the way around the edge, just like we did when we were sewing the backer on. You use the edge of the material, 1/4 inch seam, and we're just going to go all the way around this. Now this I'm going to speed up for you, but I am going to stop when I get to a point where I find that I have trouble when I'm using my regular presser foot and not a walking foot, and I'm just going to show you how I get past that, because depending on what shape pad you are sewing, you may have this issue as well. Now remember that all of your top stitching is going to be visible, so with your top stitching more than any other sewing part of this process, I want you to be very precise, very slow, go as slowly as you need to make this look neat, because your top stitching is going to be visible. And so any mistake that you make in the top stitching is going to be visible to you. All right, here we go. We're getting to a corner here. And my machine has trouble grabbing these corners. So what you do if you have a machine where you start to go and then the machine's just not advancing on one of those little corners like that, the problem is that the machine's not grabbing the fabric, and you lift the foot, rotate it back and forth, and make sure nothing is bunching or folding back there, and the machine will go. Be patient with your machine. That's very difficult. And it happened again on that corner there. Oh, this was the part where I sewed over the turn space, and you'll see you need to check and make sure that you've grabbed that fabric so that there's not a hole there anymore. And this corner gave me the same stubborn issue. Usually when I have a walking foot, this does not happen because it pulls the fabric through more evenly. But if you're using a regular presser foot, this may very well happen to you where it's just not advancing, where the feed dogs are just not pulling the fabric through. So if you saw what I did, I was raising my presser foot and jiggling the fabric back and forth to make sure that there was nothing folding under and that it could grab it. And that's usually all you have to do. Sometimes it's immediate, sometimes it takes a little jostling. The key is not to get really frustrated and give up. There's always a solution. It did it on those corners too, but since I had already showed it to you, I didn't slow the video down again. My machine just does not like going over those corners with a regular foot. Okay, and then when we get down to the end again, you want to make sure that you overlap your original stitching, back stitch to make sure that none of that's going to unravel. And the only step left is to add some sort of closure, and I'm going to show you how I do it. There you go. Okay, home stretch, guys. All we have to do is add our snaps. I use the poly resin snaps. I use the Cam brand size 20. And each cam plier set comes with an awl, AWL awl, which is basically just a poker thingy that helps you poke a hole in the fabric. Now, to determine where I put my snaps, I don't ever mark that on my patterns. I just fold the wings over, make sure that I like what it looks like, and then I pick a spot that's in the center and poke a hole. Now you want to rub the fabric back and forth on the awl several times. Don't stab yourself with the awl, it hurts. I've done it many times. And then you take your post, that's called the post, stick it through. Get it all wiggled down so that the post isn't unobstructed by extra fabric, and then you're going to seat the socket. Or at least that's what I do. And then you use the pliers as directed to squeeze it on there. Ta-da! One side of our snaps. All done. You see that the post gets nice and squashed down. And then I just overlap it, make sure I'm looking real close where I need to put the other snap. So I'm going to find my place to focus on and do my other pokey pokey. Poke your hole. Jiggle it back and forth to make sure that hole is nice and open. Now, here's the key. If the post on that side is facing one way, the post on this side faces the other way. That's just your rule of thumb so that you never actually put the snaps on incorrectly, because taking these off is a big B. So don't, yeah, you don't want to have to do that. And then we put this on and smush it down. Whatever kind of closure you use, you know, they all work for somebody, but these are my favorite. That one, I felt it and it was still a little bit jiggly. I didn't squeeze it down hard enough, so I just gave it a good second squeeze. Now it's much better. And our pad is all finished. We did it! Ta-da! And that's how you sew a pad together. If you have any questions, if you have any comments, please leave them down below. Thank you so much for watching and supporting the channel. Don't forget to subscribe and come join us on Facebook. Thanks, bye.